Bonjour les étudiants, welcome to another French lesson. Today's French lesson is a very important lesson. Why? Because today we are going to learn about French verbs. As I already said earlier also that verbs play a very important role in a language. Without a verb, you cannot make a sentence. Now, the question comes, what is a verb first? What is a verb? So what is a verb? So a verb is any kind of action is a verb. For example, in English, let's take to do. To do is a verb. Next, to make. To make is also a verb. To play is a verb. To sing is also a verb. What else? Let's take to eat is also a verb. So these are all verbs. Now we will learn about French verbs. So the first and foremost thing which you need to understand in French verbs is there are two types of verbs in French. There are two types of verbs in French. Regular verbs and irregular verbs. Now what are regular verbs? So regular verbs are those verbs who follow a specific rule of conjugation. Regular verbs are those verbs who follow a specific rule of conjugation. That means if you know the rule of conjugating regular French verbs, then you can easily conjugate all the regular verbs in French. Why? Because you know the rule of conjugating regular verbs. Now, what are irregular verbs? So, irregular verbs are those verbs who do not follow any rule of conjugation. Irregular verbs are those verbs who do not follow any rule of conjugation. That means you have to memorize them, you have to learn them. Why? Because these verbs do not follow any kind of rule, any kind of pattern. For example, till now you have learned how many verbs? 3 verbs. Like être, avoir, and aller verb. Till now you have learned these three verbs, être, avoir, and aller. So you had to memorize them. Why? Because these verbs are irregular verbs. These verbs do not follow any kind of rule of conjugation. So this is the first and foremost thing which everyone should know in French verbs. Now let's move ahead. Let's go a bit deep in French verbs. Another thing which you need to understand while learning about French verbs is in French, verbs are divided into 3 groups. Verbs are divided into 3 groups. In the first group comes ER ending verbs. In the second group comes IR ending verbs. And in the third group comes RE ending verbs. Now you must be thinking, why am I calling them ER ending, IR ending and RE ending verbs? It's because if any verb ends with ER, so we call it ER ending verbs. For example, look at this verb, regarder. So this verb ends with ER. Regarder means to watch. So this verb ends with ER. That's why we call it ER ending verbs. The second verb is manger. Manger means to eat, manger. This verb also ends with ER. So that's why we call them ER ending verbs, which comes in first group. Now let's move ahead with this verb, finir verb. Finir verb means to finish. See this verb also ends with IR. And this choisir. Choisir means to choose. This verb also ends with IR. So that's why we call them IR ending verbs. Let's go to this verb now, these verbs. So this is the first verb which is vendre verb. Vendre verb means to sell. This verb also ends with RE. And this apprendre. Apprendre means to learn. This verb also ends with RE. That's why we call them RE ending verbs. So this is the second most important thing which you need to know while learning about French verbs. In this French lesson, we will only learn about the first group of verbs, regular ER verbs in present tense. How to conjugate regular ER ending verbs in French. For that, first we need a regular ER verb. So let's take regarder verb, regarder. Regarder. Regarder means to watch. To watch. So this is a regular ER ending verb in French. So now we are going to learn how to conjugate this regular ER ending verb in French. Okay, there is one more thing which also you need to know, and that this regarder is a verb which is in the form of infinitive. We call it infinitive. Now what is an infinitive? An infinitive is a verb which is not conjugated yet. An infinitive is a verb which is not conjugated yet. For example, in English, what is an infinitive? So in English, the infinitive, it starts with to, like to watch, to play, to sing. So what is it? This is infinitive in English. When you write this infinitive with the subjects, then it becomes a conjugation. It becomes a conjugation of that particular verb. For example, let's take a verb to watch. So if you write subject pronouns with the verb watch, so it becomes I watch, you watch, he watches, she watches. So now what is it? This is called the conjugation of a verb watch. So now let's focus on conjugating regular ER ending verb in French. So first and foremost, before you start conjugating this verb, the first thing which you need to write down is the subject pronouns. The subject pronouns. Now what are subject pronouns in French? So subject pronouns in French are je, tu, il, elle, then on, then nous, then vous, then again il and elle. Okay, this is in the form of singular, and this is in the form of plural. Now we have written subject pronouns in French. Now according to the rule, in order to conjugate any ER ending verb in French, first what we have to do, we have to remove this ER. We have to remove this ER. When you remove this ER, we are left with what? We are left with this regard. This regard. This. So this regard, we call it radical. What do we call it? Radical. So this radical you need to put in front of all the subject pronouns here. So let's put these radical here. Now we have put the radical in front of all the subject pronouns. Now according to the second rule, what we have to do? We have to add on certain endings. We have to add on certain endings with this radical according to the pronouns. Now what are those endings? So the endings are this: E, ES, E, E, ONS, EZ, ENT and ENT. These endings you have to memorize: E, ES, EE, ONS, EZ, ENT, ENT. Now these endings we have to add on with the radical according to the pronoun. Like with the case of je, we will add on here what? E. With tu, we will add on ES in this radical. With il, we will add on E. With L also we will add on E. With on also we will add on E. With nu we will add on ONS. ONS. With vu we will add on EZ. And with il and L we will add on ENT and ENT. Now this is the conjugation of regarder verb. This is the conjugation of regarder verb. Now let's pronounce this conjugation. So it's like je regarde, that means I watch or I am watching. Tu regardes, you watch or you are watching. Il regarde, he watches and he is watching. Elle regarde, she is watching or she watches. On regarde means one watches or we watch. Nous regardons, we watch, yeah, we are watching. Vous regardez, you watch or you are watching. Il regarde, they watch or they are watching. Elle regarde, they watch and they are watching. You must be thinking, what is this il and elle? The meaning is same, they. So we use il with masculine plural and we use elle with feminine plural. So this is the rule of conjugating regular ER verb in French. So the most important thing which you need to keep in mind is what? while conjugating any regular ER ending verb? First, you need to remove ER from the infinitive, and then you have to add on these endings with the radical. In this way, you can easily conjugate any regular ER ending verb in French. Now, here we have some commonly used ER verbs. So these are all regular ER ending verbs. Now, you can easily conjugate all these verbs. Why? Because right now you know how to conjugate regular ER ending verbs. You know the rule. So you can easily conjugate all these verbs. Now, let's pronounce these verbs one by one. So the first verb is visiter. Visiter. Visiter means to visit. Second verb is écouter. Écouter. Écouter means to listen. Then étudier. Étudier. Étudier means to study. Then we have donner. Donner verb means to give. Donner. Then we have jouer. Jouer verb means to play. Jouer. Then we have travailler. Travailler. Travailler means to work. Then we have aimer verb. Aimer. Aimer verb means to like and to love, both. Then we have regarder. Regarder means to watch. Then détester. Détester means to hate. Then we have chanter. Chanter means to sing. Chanter. Then we have inviter. Inviter, that means to invite. Then fermer. Fermer means to close. Fermer. Fermer, that means to close. The last is tomber. Tomber means to fall. Tomber.